Hello and welcome to Policy Watch, your packed snapshot on the week's biggest business stories, their context, their relevance and their impact. I'm Surabhi Upadhyay. Well, historic highs for the Indian stock market, frenzy on the Lal Street and on campaign trails as election fever rises across the country. But before we get to all the election heat and dust or to the dizzying heights of the Sensex, we take a look at a battle that's turning out to be a corporate, political and policy pot boiler. Now, Reliance Industries versus Government of India. Government of India versus Arvind Kejriwal. Arvind Kejriwal versus the BJP. Is this hoarding or technical problems? Is this corporate manipulation or a real need to hike the price? The battle over natural gas in this country rages on. Now, finally, with the Election Commission refusing to let the government increase the price from the 1st of April, round one, for now, seems to have gone to Mr. Arvind Kejriwal.
Arvind Kejriwal has had his way after all. Even after government clearances and notifications months back, the Election Commission decided to stop the hike for now. Petroleum Minister Veerappa Moily says the government may question the suspension legally.
We will be consulting the Solicitor General or Attorney General. I don't want to give any reaction until our ministry consults them.
It was to have been a substantial hike, covering gas produced by PSUs and private producers, including Reliance. From the present $4.2 a unit, natural gas would have gone up to $8 a unit. On its part, Reliance Industries questioned the price hike deferment. A change in gas pricing from April 1st is not a new decision, but only implementation of a cabinet decision taken in June 2013, said a company statement. The Election Commission's decision has the support of left parties that had challenged the cabinet decision.
This is a quite right decision. Firstly, because it is a controversial decision. Secondly, a case is pending. Thirdly, the code of conduct has come into effect. Therefore, in such a situation, they cannot ask for any permission.
During his tenure as Delhi's Chief Minister, Kejriwal had launched an attack against Petroleum Minister Veerappa Moily, former Petroleum Minister Murli Deora, Reliance Chairman Mukesh Ambani and others for what he called unjustified rise in gas prices. The government had cited the need to raise prices to boost output. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
Well, with billions of dollars and the future of country's energy security at stake, there's a lot more than just gas to this story. And who better to discuss this over with but Himanshu Watts, who is, of course, energy and infra editor at the Economic Times. Himanshu, hello. It's great to have you in the studios again. First things first, does your car run on gas or on petrol? Just checking.
Neither. Diesel.
Oh, okay. So we've got the disclaimers out of the way.
Okay.
No, but on a more serious note, this is something which the entire oil and gas sector, all the analysts out there were waiting for. And it seemed that April 1, there would be clarity and price hike would happen as planned.
Yeah.
But politics has come in with a completely new twist, right?
Yeah, this was a bit unexpected because by and large, as you said, it was taken for granted that come April 1 and the price changes. But the Government of India itself, the Oil Ministry in its wisdom decided to consult the Election Commission, which is probably because there was such a hue and cry in election rallies, particularly of Arvind Kejriwal, who made it an issue every time. So government in its wisdom thought it's best to go to the Election Commission, which in turn said, no, don't do it.
But you know, it's more than the Election Commission right now, because had it just been an issue of election code of conduct, it would have been okay, it won't happen now, it'll happen 2 months later. But there are cases pending in the Supreme Court. So what happens?
See, these cases were pending in the Supreme Court even when the cabinet was considering it. So they decided to increase the price by adopting the Rangarajan formula while this case was going on. Then they issued a notification for the formula while this case was going on. What they had to do now was just
Was that wrong in a way? Or do you think that, I mean, in this country, in any case, there's the judicial process and then there is the administrative process, and both end up going on? Even though in the case of telecom, as we've seen, I mean, the judicial process has completely overruled and overthrown administrative or government decisions.
Yeah. See, that's a debatable point because anything the government does, there could be some court case affecting it. So one cannot take a position that just because the court is looking at something, administrative procedure should come to a halt. Unless court has issued an order or expressed some concern. Now, this case was at a very preliminary initial stage.
Hearings are still going on.
Yeah. So I wouldn't blame the government for going ahead with its decisions while this case is going on. But because, the case hearings were there in the last week and they're going to resume pretty soon, I think both the Election Commission and the government would have thought that given the fact that this government's term is ending, elections are on, and in this context, let's see if the Supreme Court has something to say in the next few days. So,
now, let's just talk about the issue at hand. It's very easy to politicize things, particularly in our lovely country. So, of course, the Aam Aadmi Party says, Mr. Kejriwal says that this is complete corporate manipulation, hand in glove with political parties. He's asking the BJP to come on record and still saying that they haven't taken a stance. But if we look at the core issue, raising this price from about $4 to $8, it's a doubling, so it seems a lot. Is there sound economic rationale behind it?
See, if you look at it impassionately without, seeing the various passions and political hue and cry involved, there are two clear issues. One is the immediate thing that there are customers of gas, whether they should be suddenly asked to double it. There are power companies, there are fertilizer companies, although power production in India from gas is barely 5% of supply. The other issue is that do we want to produce more gas in India? For that, we've had some public sector companies which have not been able to increase supply too much, and therefore government has the policy of trying to invite the private sector.
And many of them come, take blocks, then don't do much and they leave and go.
Yeah. Now, according to the oil ministry itself, the minister himself, he says there are many fields which are not commercially viable at the current price of $4 per unit.
Are we talking about the current oil minister, or are we talking about the previous one against whom, of course, the Aam Aadmi Party launched a campaign? I mean, Murli there, or are you talking about the current minister?
The current minister, Veerappa Moily. He and the finance minister Chidambaram, when they announced the cabinet decision 9 or 10 months ago, their logic was that there's certain fields where the cost of production is more than the current price. And the logic was that if you increase it, these fields will become viable. And because it becomes profitable, many more private, efficient companies will come and explore in Indian basins and produce more gas. Because if you don't do that, then you import LNG, which is $16 or $17 a unit. So that is a medium to long-term argument. Against that is the immediate argument that these poor guys who are buying gas today, what happens to them? If somebody has a power plant which is fired by gas, he's already pretty costly, struggling to sell power, and is probably not be able to sell it after this. So these are two conflicting issues, and it's a administrative cum political decision whether you want to satisfy the current customers or whether you want to give incentives for private companies to come and explore more gas and produce more later.
The numbers are very interesting, as you mentioned. LNG costing almost $14, $15, if not more. By the time
times 18, 20 also, but 16 also. Yeah.
Now this is interesting because this is gas being produced elsewhere in the world, so there is shipping cost, of course, involved. Sounds very, very high. We were till now getting gas at around $4 to $5 in the country. There's shale gas as well. A lot of people talk about shale, which at least seems to be cheaper, particularly in the US. Mr. Kejriwal says you can produce gas between $2 to $3 as well. I don't know how, but I mean, that's a statistic that he's come up with. What number is believable when it comes to a fair price for gas?
There is actually no fair price for gas. There are two ways you can price gas. One is not just gas, any commodity, a market price is what the market is ready to pay for it. I mean, the same goes for individuals also. I mean, what is a fair salary? It is what, the potential employers are ready to pay you. If you look at the US, and that's a very interesting example where gas is selling at the current Indian price, 4.2, 4.3. And last year it had come down to 2.5, 3.
And what sort of gases is it we're talking about?
Well, it is the same natural gas.
It's natural gas itself.
Yeah, which is methane, CH3. But the source in US is from shale. Now, the US example is very interesting. Say 4 or 5 years ago, the gas price in US was $12, $13, and at times even $15, if you look at the previous decade. Now, the US let the market forces operate. Once the gas price was this high, the companies had an enormous incentive to drill and look for gas.
So lots of producers came in.
And the basic shale production technology, which is called fracking, that got introduced and commercially viable, and it became so popular that US is now sitting on a gas surplus and the prices crashed.
Have automatically cooled off.
So, if you go by market forces, then you see both the extremes. You know, you had $13, $14, $15 of domestic gas in US, and you had $2 or $3 also.
Well, that's a classic debate. Do you let market forces prevail, or do you go the socialist way? In fact, we're going to take a break on that note, and that will lead us to our next story as well. It's the election season. Poll manifestos are being declared. We'll take a look at what the Congress had to say on the other side. Welcome back. Here with Policy Watch. The week saw the Congress party release its election manifesto. As expected, the party promised a slew of pro-poor measures, including homes and affordable healthcare for all. There was also talk of reviving GDP growth to 8% within 3 years, and another attempt at bringing in a common goods and services tax and the new direct tax code. Here's more.
Right to health and housing are two of the prominent highlights of the Congress manifesto that was released on Wednesday. The document is based on consultations that Party Vice President Rahul Gandhi had with people across the country. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh says it tries to cover the needs of all sections.
This is an election promise which covers the needs of all sections of our society, farmers in particular, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, our women, our children, and in that process, this is a forward-looking document.
हमने सभी देशवासियों के लिए स्वास्थ्य के अधिकार का वादा किया है, जिससे सबकी सेहत की देखभाल एक सच्चाई बनकर सामने आए। कांग्रेस पार्टी सभी भूमिहीन और गरीब परिवारों को आवास के अधिकार का भी दावा कर रही है।
The Congress is promising basic rights to both organized and unorganized workers, the attempt being to raise 2/3 of the population to middle-class status. Right to health, pension, housing, social security, right to dignity and humane working conditions are some of the other promises that the manifesto makes. Healthcare spending is expected to be raised to 3% of the GDP in order to provide free medicines to all Indians. The manifesto also intends to bring down inflation while increasing manufacturing to 10%. The party wants to give entrepreneurs rights while promising an investment of $1 lakh crore in the next decade to boost India's infrastructure. The opposition parties, however, feel the promises are too unrealistic.
The entire manifesto appears to be devoid of credibility, bereft of substance, and seriously lacking in seriousness.
जो चुनाव घोषणा पत्र में कांग्रेस पार्टी ने वायदे किए हैं, उनको पूरा करने के लिए हमारे देश की जर्जर अर्थव्यवस्था अलाउ नहीं करती। रुपये की जो गिरती कीमत है, मुद्रास्फीति है, बदहाल आर्थिक स्थिति है, उसके रहते हुए ये वादे पूरे नहीं किए जा सकते। ये चुनाव के खोखले वादे।
On the social side, the Congress wants to pass the Women's Reservation Bill to ensure 1/3 reservation for women in Parliament. The manifesto also pledges to pursue a constitutional amendment bill to provide reservation in the promotion to SC/STs and other economically weaker sections in public employment without affecting the existing quota of SC/STs and OBCs. Krishnanand Tripathi's report for Rajya Sabha TV.
Okay, so Himanshu, first thoughts on the manifesto.
See, I have a broader point to make on the manifestos. You know, what I see is these manifestos, what has come and what is likely to come. What they broadly reflect is the maturing of Indian electorate. If you see over a long time, party manifestos are shifting from very evocative, emotive, emotional things, beginning with Garibi Hatao or 21st century mein jana hai, mandir banao, those kind of things. Now they are coming down to nuts and bolts. They're talking of growth has to be so much, you will get this right, you will get this kind of facility, and how you will get it. So on that broader point, I'm very positive.
Is India voting differently? You think it's finally happening? A change where voting patterns are no longer going to be governed by purely caste or purely emotive issues like religion, etc. Is India voting differently, you think, in this election?
I think there is a change. The old issues are not gone. They're pretty much there. But, you know, as the Delhi election showed you very recently, just a few months ago, that a complete new entity could come and almost get a majority. And I think this has to do with the spread of the media, electronic media, literacy, where, you know, somebody's parents might have thought, okay, this fellow said Garibi hatayenge and let's vote for him, or this fellow will make a mandir and I vote for him. The current generation is not accepting that. And that will slowly reflect. I mean, you still have...
you know, but I guess the big question, we'll only have the answer once the results are out, but the question is that whether this is a phenomenon limited only to your top tier 1 cities where social media is active, where, you know, there's so much of information coming through. Is it just limited to that part of India? Or is it actually seeping into the hinterland as well, into the deeper areas of Bharat, so to speak?
Well, in the tier 1, in the top cities, certainly it's there. And as far as the rest of the country is concerned, given the spread of communication and media, the time it takes for a trend in a city to spread to a smaller region is coming down a lot. Actually, this election will really show how much this trend has spread. But certainly, going by reports, the parties seems to be assuming that this trend is spreading, and you cannot take the Indian electorate for granted.
Sure.
So that message is there.
So coming to the Congress manifesto, what did you think of it?
Well, it's something one would expect. You know, if you go by what they have been doing, particularly UPA 2, various rights, lots of social issues they're focused on, whether it is education or the land law. So this was expected that they will talk of more empowerment, more such laws like right to health and a few other things. And as they would have realized in course of their governance, their regime, their tenure, that to be able to do that, you know, you need much more resources. And, you know, you cannot simply give an empty promise to people that we'll give you this, we'll distribute this, because people are beginning to ask, how will you do it? And therefore, they're talking
like the 1 trillion in infrastructure over the next, $1 trillion, that also, not 1 trillion rupees, $1 trillion over the next 10 years.
So that realization is there that, you know, you need some sound economic policies, which they have actually demonstrated in the last year or so. You know, they've got the macroeconomic indicators under control, without which things are getting out of control. So not just the Congress, I'm sure the other parties, when they come up with their manifestos, is bound to have a very clear roadmap on how they will grow and how will they spend it socially. And to that extent, what Congress has said is broadly on the expected lines. One can get into nitty-gritties whether you can do this or not, but that I think is a smaller point.
Okay, well, we'll take a very quick break. On the other side, what a week for the markets, the rupee and the stock markets, euphoric highs. Where does it all go from here? We'll discuss this when we come back. Well, $8.8 billion coming into the country, both in the equity and the debt markets. Half of this money coming in just the last 1 month alone. What does that do? It takes the indices to historic highs and it strengthens the currency. The result? A palpable sense of bliss on the Lal Street. Here's more.
It's been positives through the week for both the major indices. The benchmark 30-share BSE Sensex and NSE Nifty continued their winning streak. The BSE closed at an all-time high on Friday at 22,340. The Nifty crossed the 6,700 mark, hitting a historic high of 6,702. The BSE Sensex rose 2.7% this week. The Nifty gained 3.1%. The rally was propelled by strong buying by foreign funds, hopes of an economic recovery and a strong rupee. On Friday alone, foreign institutional investors bought equities worth 2,257 crore rupees and debt instruments worth 1,098 crore rupees. The net FII investment in equities and debt in March is over 31,663 crores, and their cumulative investment for the year so far stands at 57,727 crore rupees. Strong demand helped the rupee reach an 8-month high of 59.91 against the dollar on Friday, having gained 3.1% in March, its best month since September 2013. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
So, Himanshu, it's just all guns blazing, it seems, whether it's the markets or, the currency as well. Are you surprised with the dollar inflow that's come in? Is it elections? Is it something else? Is it improving macros? What's happening?
I'm not surprised at all because, to some extent, this is actually reversing some of the losses various markets had. Even if you look at the stock market where it is today, it was somewhere there even 5 years ago. So, it's pretty depressing how it was in the past. And say a year and a half ago when, rupee had suddenly started tumbling and the macroeconomic situation seemed very seriously depressing. And I think some of the steps which the government took, some of them were pretty unpopular, like squeezing the gold import and, lots of tough measures. And even the central bank, the Reserve Bank of India, decided to tighten the monetary policy, whereas there was a loud chorus from industry that now lower the rates so that we can invest. At the end of all this, I think the international investing community is impressed because people thought, okay, these are good policies, but come elections and India is going to squander it away. It hasn't happened. So the investor community is pretty impressed. Only last evening I was sitting with a fund manager of a foreign company. And he was saying, a year back, if I rang up my bosses abroad and talked about India, I would hear chuckles from the back of them. And today they call and say, okay, what's happening? And according to him, there are two clear reasons. One is macroeconomic stability. You may argue whether the numbers are fudged and exaggerated or something.
Exactly.
But compared to what the fears were, it is dramatically better.
And it's a dramatic improvement. I mean, it's very swift since last August.
Yeah, and particularly in the run-up to the election when people thought that, maybe the finance minister is just giving a lip service and actual things will be better. So the international community is impressed. And second is the central bank also. They are very impressed with him. One of the key things he has done is he's been very transparent and said, okay, this is the direction. I'm going to look at this kind of inflation. This is my target and this is the direction I'm going. So people knew, okay, interest rates are not going to come down. Now markets, are not so worried whether interest rates goes up or down. What they don't like is rude surprises, which they're not getting from this RBI governor. So this combination has worked pretty well. Plus, of course, there is expectation of a stable government coming.
So now, how critical is this third component going to be? I mean, hypothetically speaking, let's say if the mandate is not as clear or is not swinging the way the market has been hoping that it'll swing for many months now, how much of it would be derailing this entire story? Or do you think the story is anyway firmly rooted?
Well, the story is pretty firm. But if it is a weak coalition that comes, then certainly the markets will correct. Because at the current prices, various markets, they have priced in a stable government or a particular formation coming very close to the majority, if not clearly exceeding.
Sure.
If that does not happen, the markets will correct. That's my expectations.
Okay. So very quickly, as we are wrapping up, next week, one of the events we'll look out for is, of course, the RBI meeting. And we were just talking about the governor and the clear message that he's given so far. One of the numbers that's delighted foreign participants is inflation, CPI cooling off, WPI sub 5% right now. But we've had these unseasonal showers. How are you expecting the RBI to behave over the coming few weeks and months?
See, RBI or anybody would be very closely watching the unseasonal shower and much more the forecasts which have been coming in so far that you might have weaker monsoon this year because of El Nino. There's no unanimity on that.
Which I think the Indian Meteorological Department says no, there's no reason to worry.
Yeah, but the thing is, in no forecast have they said ever that you are worried that agri production might be down. I don't know if they confidentially tell it to the agriculture minister. I don't know about that. But, going by international forecasts, initially they said there is a slight chance. Now they're saying there's a much higher chance that there would be an El Nino.
And a big El Nino phenomena this time, I think.
Yeah, it is similar, according to some American scientists, similar to the one that hit in 97, 98. But that year, India did not have a drought. So even the correlation between El Nino and monsoon is not there. So why the RBI will be watching this is that after the 2009 drought, it suddenly took food inflation to 20% by November, December. And it has been stubbornly high year after year. The reason is India's demand, the growing population, prosperity has increased agriculture demand because that's the first thing you will buy when you can afford it. So the impact of a drought on inflation is much higher today than it was, say, compared to the 2002 drought. Prices went up, but by next year all was well. Previous drought it wasn't. So that's going to weigh. Unless you have clarity on that,
sure,
you cannot let loose of
Well,
caution.
in the meantime, the hope ride continues on the Lal Street. Well, we'll have to wind it up on that note, Himanshu. Many thanks for being with us this week. Thank you for watching Policy Watch. And of course, we'll be back next week with more stories.